9 volumes into the series, Kentaro Miura checks in on the self-worth of both Guts and Casca. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today I want to discuss some manga that I read. I am back on that manga grind, as you saw in my cold open. And today I want to focus on some manga that is all about people with giant swords and fractured mercenary groups. I am referring to Volume 9 of Berserk, which was written by Kentaro Miura and published in 1994. For those who don't know, I've talked about Kentaro Miura on this channel before, cataloging the 8 other volumes of the Berserk series, so I don't need to go into that great of detail. He was a manga writer who wrote the Berserk series as well as a couple of other mangas. He wrote some movies, including an adaptation of this, and he also wrote for video games, including an adaptation of this. Which is mixed success, but the manga is really well regarded, and I can see why. It is a lot of fun. I've been enjoying it, and each volume has proven to be subsequently greater or as good as the one before it. The only thing I've found about that thus far is Swamp Thing, which was pretty high quality. Alan Moore's run of Swamp Thing, and this is proving to be just as great, if maybe a little bit better, because there might have been some parts of Swamp Thing which weren't high quality, and this is maintaining maintaining a high level throughout. Just my 2 cents there. And so without further ado, let's talk about Volume 9 of Berserk. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Volume 9 of Berserk focuses on Guts, Casca, and Griffith as they deal with what happened in Volume 8 of Berserk. Guts defeated Griffith in combat, which meant that Guts was free to go off on his own and make a name for himself. And here, at the beginning of Volume 9, we see that Guts is on his own, traveling through the mountains, practicing his sword fighting skills, reflecting on his solitude, and noting that he's wanted to make a name for himself, and he's found himself in a better position than before he joined the Band of the Hawk, where he was feeling a lot of self-destruction. And as he's thinking of all of that, he stumbles across the Skull Knight, a very deadly foe that simply tells him an omen that says that Guts is a survivor, but his other friends, the other people that he knows, might not be so lucky, as something bad is certain to happen to them soon. Meanwhile, back in Midland, Griffith is trying to woo the Midland princess, and he sneaks into her bedroom at night, and she is very eager to be around him, noting that she loves him and that he hasn't really spent time with him since he won that great battle in Volume 8. And they proceed to have sex. But it's very interesting because Griffith is thinking about Guts while having sex, clearly not over the fact that Guts left. And unfortunately, someone looks through the keyhole and sees that Griffith is doing sex to the princess, and they tell the king, who has Griffith arrested. And the king holds him in the dungeon and notes that he is just a commoner, indicating that his high status hasn't really fully carried over, and that Griffith isn't worthy of the princess, to which Griffith responds that the king must have had a number of offers for someone to marry the princess by now, and so for the fact that the princess is unmarried must mean that the king has eyes for her, which is gross and makes the king unworthy. The king is taken aback by this and insists it's not true, but we later see that the king is perving on his daughter, trying to kiss her and lick her and all sorts of weird things, to which she responds by shouting for Griffith, which makes the king even madder, basically, Griffith at this point is sentenced to death and can't seem to escape from the dungeons. And to make matters worse, the Band of the Hawk is attacked by the Midland army, and now they are fugitives from the law. Meanwhile, as time passes, Guts fights at a festival, including coming across a pretty talented fighter named Master Silet, who proves to be a bit of a danger to him, but he's able to somewhat defeat him. Guts manages to do really great at this festival, and it's revealed that the king organized it to gather soldiers so that they can attack a local a group of thieves, which are revealed to be the Band of the Hawk, which is now being led by Casca. And we see from her perspective that she's leading the band, but she's very tired out and worn out because she's not as dedicated as Griffith, and it's just she's losing so many men because of their fugitive status. A bunch of soldiers attack in the night, and Casca and everyone tries to fend them off, and then Master Silet shows up and is threatening to kill Casca. But at this point, Guts shows up, sort of following these people, and has a big fight against Silet, which Guts manages to get the upper hand, but doesn't quite defeat him, and Master Silet declares vengeance, that he will one day return for Guts. At that point, Guts reunites with all the members of the Band of the Hawk, who are happy to see him again. However, Guts and Casca go off, have a confrontation where Casca is very unhappy that Guts left, and she insists that Guts leaving made Griffith weaker because that's all he could think about at that point. And Casca, noting that her self-worth kind of crashed as well because she realized that she loved Griffith but knew that he only had eyes for like royalty or the princess, and it was never going to be. And since she developed so much of her identity on Griffith, if she doesn't have that, what does she have? And she feels like she's a lie to herself and others. But Guts assures her that she needs to stay alive because she threatens to kill herself. That she's not a lie. Nobody who could have her scars or her skills could be a lie. That she has self-worth. And from there they have sex, which is very interesting, especially because Miura has been building up the sexual tension between the two for several volumes. And as they're having sex, Guts remembers Gambino, the man who raised him, and that Guts killed because he tried to sell him into sex slavery or something like that. And Guts is just like in traumatized at this moment because he's stuck in this sort of past. And Casca helps him deal with it a little bit, to which they then have sex and are together again. And as the story comes to a close, Guts envisions his past where he's a child and he sees that the sword that he's carrying is there, even if it wasn't there in actuality, showing that the sword is kind of becoming a part of who he is, part of his destiny. In terms of analysis, there is quite a bit we're talking about with Volume 9 of Berserk. I really loved this one because of how it sort of won me over in the end. Like, I thought it was great throughout, but then I sort of felt like it wasn't telling as much story as it could have as it went on, and I felt like it could have done more with maybe rescuing Griffith. But then we got to the end, the confrontation between Guts and Casca, and I was blown away, not only by what Miura was writing, but also the art that was present, and I'll get to that in a few moments. But one of the themes that Miura is writing about here is that of solitude. So Guts essentially left the Band of the Hawk, and he hoped to find himself in the wilderness, in the mountains, that he was trying to establish his own identity, as he noted, apart from Griffith, so that he could stand one day besides Griffith. And what's interesting is he's sort of trying to do this in relation to his past. So like before he joined the Band of the Hawk, he was suicidal, self-destructive, he wanted to die, and he was challenging anyone in the hopes that he might die. And that's sort of what led him to Griffith in the first place. And so he's sort of come like across these realizations. He's sort of reflected, and now he understands a little bit more about who he was and where he is afterwards. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. When I think about it, I haven't been truly alone once these 3 years. I'd forgotten this sense of unease, unless my sword's right next to me. I'd forgotten that the night was this vast, this deep. Back then, it never occurred to me I could have avoided nights like this. I never even thought to try. And that's just a very fascinating quote, because it's sort of Guts reflecting on who he once was. And also how he hasn't really been alone to be able to reflect on who he once was, kind of running away from that feeling that of the emotions that are weighing upon you. And it's so easy to run away from them, because if you deal with them, Guts is going to be hurt. Like he's not going to be able to put up this tough demeanor. He's going to be emotional, and that might cost him his life. So it's very interesting that Miura is sort of having Guts reflect on this. And at the same time, he's also having Casca do much of the same thing, because Casca reflects on life without Griffith, reflecting on whether she's actually a good warrior, whether she means anything without Griffith, because she's formed her identity on him, and now he's not there. Like, can you imagine? I'm sure we can all imagine that, like, having someone in our life and considering them such an integral part of it and who we are and our self-worth, and then they're not there anymore, and it's like, who are we? How do we continue on? How do we prove that we're worthy and deserving of life, of anything in this world? And so essentially what Miura is doing is having Guts and Casca ask, are we enough for ourselves? We've relied on others for quite some time, but are we enough for our own self? Can we continue on? Can we be happy with who we are in the present moment? And so essentially Miura is looking deep into the soul. You wouldn't expect this out of a manga. At least I wouldn't. I didn't think I was going to get into this when I started reading the Berserk series. I thought it was just cool swords and action scenes. And here's Miura, saying, are you worthy? Do you have self-worth? Can you look yourself in the mirror and be happy? I think Guts is making his way there. But Casca, she considers killing herself, because she can't really go on with all the self-doubt that's going on. And I like that Guts is like, no, you are enough. Like, you can't be a lie to yourself, because you've been through all this. You have worth. You have proven yourself to be worthy, and you got to look inward and realize that yourself. And Miura is doing a lot of great work here. Miura is also talking a little bit about politics. Griffith is trying to politic his way to the throne, and he's doing that via the princess. We've seen that in the past couple of volumes, as Griffith has been sort of manipulating the princess into being closer to her, which is kind of creepy. But that's just what he wants. He believes he has ambition and he has desire. And again, to Griffith, anyone who doesn't have that is unworthy. And so Griffith believes that him wanting this means that he must have it, or something like that. However, even with all those titles, the king still considers him a commoner, that you can't really escape from where you grew up. The king has an idea in mind of who might be right for the princess, and it is definitely not Griffith. Showing that, even if you do a lot of hard work, you can be pushed aside if someone just doesn't think that you're worthy of what you're trying to achieve. And it also shows the ugliness of the throne, because the king is perving on his daughter. It's showing that the king believes himself to be this great person, but deep down he's harboring these gross and disgusting thoughts about his own daughter, and refusing to let anyone even close to her, which is not really good. It's just very interesting how Griffith kind of exposes this unsettling behavior out of people. And you also see how quick the Hawks lose favor. Like, the second Griffith gets out of favor, the Hawks are personas non grata, or something like that. They, even though they did so much to help Midland bring about this peace and become the dominant kingdom, if Griffith does one thing wrong, suddenly they all have to die or be imprisoned, or something like that. So, Miura is just showing how politics actually work, and the politics of this kingdom, and how it doesn't work out for Griffith or the Band of the Hawk. Another important element to talk about, as I was mentioning earlier, is Guts and Casca's confrontation in this volume. It's particularly well written, well structured. The themes are all amazing, and the art is particularly amazing, as you might have seen throughout this video. So at the heart of it, Casca is mad that Guts chose to leave, but at the same time, she's also deeply upset with herself about her perceived worth in relation to that of Griffith. It really shows if you idealize somebody, and again, if they leave, then what's that going to do for your own self-esteem? It's certainly not going to help. So there's a lot that Casca is mad about here. And as Guts says, I left because I had to. Like, I had to find myself, and maybe I didn't completely do that yet, but I know that I will. And that's all I did. I didn't do anything else besides hand Griffith his first real loss. But Casca's saying, you upset the status quo and you did that. You showed Griffith that he wasn't the top banana anymore. There was someone else who was maybe a little stronger than him, a little bit more worthy and ambitious. And Guts leaving also showed Casca that maybe she wasn't as important to Griffith as she thought, because of course, like, he's going to continue his ambitions and seek the princess over Casca. So what does that leave Casca with, especially if the man that she loved can't really return those emotions to her? So really doing a good job of, like, disrupting the status quo and peeling apart, the dimensions of why these two are upset. But I really like how in Casca and sort of bearing herself, Guts is like, he tries to stop her from killing herself, and he's like, no, you are not. You're not a lie. You're a true, honest person, and these scars, these marks, these war wounds, these fights that you engage in, they prove that you're not a lie, because you survive. You're a survivor, and you're strong enough. You are good enough. You are worthy enough, and you should be worthy enough to yourself, as I've been saying this entire time. And I really like how Guts is willing to stick his neck out, which he hasn't done before, to be truly emotional, to truly show that he cares for someone, and that person is Casca. He hasn't done that for anyone apart from maybe Gambino, but after Gambino died, there was nobody there. So it's Miura is showing Guts' personal growth in a very beautiful and interesting way. And then, like, it's really interesting how, like, this entire scene is structured, because you have a fight, you have sex, and then you have Guts sort of focusing on his trauma, and then you have more sex after they resolve some of the issues that Guts is dealing with. It's very fascinating how Miura chooses to structure it, and it's not just simply sex for sex sake. It's an act of bearing one's soul, of being emotionally vulnerable, because what these characters are doing, they're bearing their souls nakedly, and they too are naked. When you are naked, you can't really, like, Guts is no longer wearing his shield, Casca is no longer wearing her shield. All they have are their exposed naked bodies, and they're revealing themselves to one another in a way that they haven't quite done before. And the art complements that, and it's very beautiful, very emotional section that really sold me on this particular volume as truly great, as just as good as the rest of the volumes. And for Miura to be able to structure it that way and depict it that way in a very tasteful, very powerful kind of moment, or not even a moment, but in an entire chapter, I think it's some of the most high quality reading that I've encountered in a long while. Like, it's so simple, yet it's so effective. And there are other things that I like about this particular volume too. The use of Gambino is particularly interesting, because we haven't seen, like, Gambino mentioned in a while, ever since Guts killed him in his youth. But here's Gambino again showing back up, indicating that Guts hasn't really dealt with that trauma since he joined the Band of the Hawk. Like, he found people to be around, and so he busied his mind in that way. But if you don't deal with the things that are bothering you beneath the surface, they're still going to be there. It doesn't just go away. The brain is good at forgetting, but some things it needs you need to address. You need to actually focus on and actually work. Otherwise, Guts is never going to truly heal from what happened with him and Gambino. And then another interesting aspect of this particular volume is the use of the sword, particularly noting how Guts is getting even more powerful with using it, making it part of who he is. But also when he thinks back to his childhood, he sees himself with the sword. Again, noting that how that might be part of his destiny, or just part of who he is now. That it's become so ingrained in his sort of life that as he even says, it's just my nature. Like, carrying the sword, being a sword fighter is who I am, which is kind of sad when you think about it, because if that's all he sees himself as, like, is he going to be able to live a regular life? Is he going to be able to be with Casca, or are they just going to fight their entire lives? Is that all he's capable of doing? And I do see Miura kind of approaching that point where he's going to force Guts to make a decision in future volumes. Is he going to have a normal life and live peacefully with Casca? Or is his nature, is his way of seeing himself as a constant sword fighter, of a constant demon slayer, of a constant soldier, is that going to interfere with his happiness, with his ability to ever have any sense of normalcy? It remains to be seen, but I love where Miura is going with this. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Volume 9 of the stellar Berserk series. I highly recommend it to you to start with Volume 1, of course, but Volume 9 is an excellent read. This entire series is great, and I know I keep repeating that, but it's important to acknowledge when something is high quality, and this is a very high quality series that is more than it appears to be. Because on the outside, it just looks like, sword fighting and boobs, but there's a lot more to it than that. And sword fighting and boobs can be a great story on its own, but Miura clearly wants to write something more than that. So yeah, if you have anything to say about my review here or just want to comment on the series, let me know in the comments below. Would love to hear from you, have a discussion. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this series or this author if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and giant sword fighting travels. Farewell.